It's the SDG Podcast. Before we get started, you can check us out on the web at solutiondesign.com/podcast or find us on all the social medias, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Solution Design Group. And we're podcasting. Who we got in the podcast? Say hello.
Hi, I'm Peter Lawrence.
Yourselves. Sorry, I talked over you.
Hi.
He's Peter Lawrence.
I'm Peter Lawrence.
I'm Jeff Urban.
And I'm Kyle Bacher. And today we're going to talk about measuring success. How do you know? How do you calculate it? So you do a project and we start a podcast and I immediately go out after publishing the first one and start checking the metrics.
Did it feel like a success right then? Nobody downloading it?
Nobody was listening. It was a complete failure. I'm like, this has been out here for 5 minutes. What's the deal? So, the ROI question, like, what's our ROI going to be? What are the KPIs? Stuff like that. I've always found really hard to come up with. So how do you measure success? Like when you build an app, Peter? When you
happy customers.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the easy way. Happy customers, especially if it's an internal. If it's an internal app, it's so much easier because you get to walk by people and they get to tell you how good a job you've done and how much it's saved them and what it's helped them do and accomplish in their daily lives. That is super helpful and super powerful. External apps, you do have to do some metrics and stuff like that. Keep track of, complaints are always a good way to measure success. Lack of complaints or easily fixed things that people just have a little, grumble with.
Right. Like no news is good news. Good news is better news than no news.
Right.
But no news is good.
Yeah.
Unless it's so bad they've given up and won't bother even talking to you about it. But
that's a bridge that gets crossed after a long time, right? Most people are willing to at least call for help once.
Right.
Yeah.
Give us a chance to let you down.
Nobody gives up right away. Nobody like, oh yeah, we give up.
Yeah. So just this year I've done a few things. Finished our intranet, kind of redo our rebuild, reimagining,
are you sure?
redesign. It's never finished, but we had to draw a line in the sand. We had to put up the tape and you got
the MVP done?
Yeah. Well, the MVP was many years ago. It was really minimal.
It was viable, but it
was viable.
Yeah, it was very minimal.
Yeah. And then automating some processes. The feedback I got from that project was what took 2 weeks now takes 4 hours.
That's nice.
One of my greatest wins of all time. That was huge for me. That I was able to help someone that much, that quickly, and get that feedback. I guess I'm just going to brag the rest of the podcast.
Kyle's only success. We're going to hear about it many times.
Right.
So Jeff, you bring a little bit different slant to it, especially in your current role, right? How do you know a social committee is a success, or how do you know a learning committee is a success, or stuff like that? Those are kind of internal SDG things that we do. Do you care if they're a success? Do you look at that?
Yeah, it is. I think part of it is understanding. I'm very much a long-term type of person, right? How is this going to be successful long-term? Because there's oftentimes you can have big success the first time you do something, but the effort that you needed to take in order to make that happen pretty much burned out everybody that was doing it, and they're only going to do it once, right? And so I think I think it's really cool if you can develop it in such a way that it's going to exist for a long time, that it's going to bring value for a long time. You know, the big event that all three of us have worked on is a great example. So it's a mini conference that we do within the organization. We recognize how much time it's going to take for us to put it on and what the rewards are for doing it. But we do it in such a way that it's a repeatable process, but yet it's still, we're always looking for innovation, and people enjoy it and people have success. And for the most part, we don't burn ourselves out trying to put it together. Once in a while, we get a little crazy with technology and cameras, and all of a sudden it ends up being a lot more work than Kyle ever predicted it was going to take, because he said, this should be easy. I'll just set up. Yep, I got this. Don't worry about it. And then he's cursing for a week. But you know, that's kind of a lot of times the approach that I'm looking at is let's get, you know, it's a very agile type of approach. Hey, we plan on doing this numerous times. Let's figure out what we can do to make this happen, not only for the people that are attending, but also for the people that are putting it on, so that they'll want to continue to do it, that they actually have fun doing it.
Right. You know, you bring up the big event, and we've talked about it a little bit on the podcast. And it hasn't always been the same format, right? It hasn't always been, you know, the same number of tracks, the same number of presenters, the same number, you know, always in person, obviously.
Yeah.
Or always all remote.
We had a pivotal moment, like, and we've had that a few times where we're like, okay, let's cut away some of the tasks here. Let's not do these shirts anymore. Like, some of these things were just, you know, people were not that crazy about them.
For the record, Kyle's favorite part was the shirts. He loved working with design and trying to get them and getting them ordered in the right sizes for the limited number of people that we had. It was his favorite part.
But you know, that continual like process of improvement. But we hit a point where we, like, Jeff and I totally butted heads. And I went to his office and turned his desk over, and but that was a great moment because it changed the way we thought about the event.
It did.
And instead of a technical, like, based, like, we're serving like 75% of the company, and ignoring 25%. And it was like, well, let's treat it like a, you know, something for everyone event instead. And then it became way easier to do our selection stuff. I mean, after that moment, Jeff, they're like, we didn't have that problem again.
Yeah, we were talking about speaker selection, and I had missed a meeting for whatever reason, and so there was just we had different information in trying to make our decisions, right? You know, I had some information in my head that I thought was relevant, and Kyle had information that was relevant, but together we didn't have the same information. And once we just sat down and you know, I'm sure I sent an email that I probably shouldn't have sent an email. I should have probably went and talked to somebody instead. But that's part of the success. That's working with a team, right? It's at the end of the day, being able to listen and trust one another and respect one another and work your way through it. And that's what we were able to do. And I think that, like Kyle said, it was a huge success. And once we both had the same information in making decisions, we were back in alignment, and it's gone really well, you know, going forward. And that's just the dynamics of working with a team is, you know, do you have the same outcomes? Are you looking at the same outcomes for what success is, right? And so, and that was part of our process that we went through in that event planning, and you do that with a lot of the event plannings, right? And so, even though, like, I work with a lot of communities, you know, even though I've had the conversation with many of them, I can't always remember that I've had it with every single one of them, right? On what expectations are. And so spending a little bit more time and revisiting, and even if I have had the conversation, I can't guarantee that they actually listened to me and understood what I was saying. And so, you know, let's have the conversation again, and let's go through it again. And you know, just because you've said it, you know, 17 times doesn't mean that you said it to that particular person and they weren't aware. And so, just being a little cautious about making sure that everybody has the same information.
Well, I think, like you're looking at, if you look at success from the customer, user, whatever you like, that perspective, or attendee, the person you're building it for, but as the person building it, to be able to be open, and I guess, analyzing, continually trying to improve, like you can see like some of the things yourself that aren't going so well and make those adjustments, even though you don't have that feedback yet or haven't gotten it. So it's like you can measure kind of yourself based on your gut and how smooth things are going. I guess that would be it.
So that kind of follows the agile process, right? Where you come together after you've finished a sprint or after you've finished some piece of work, and you get together and you say, what did we do right? What did we do wrong? What do we need to keep doing, right? What do we need to fix? What are we doing? What do we need to recognize as people doing well, a good job of something, right? And I think that process helps not just success of a team, but success of a project overall, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And part of it is what's your role on the team too, right? I mean, so if you are assigned tasks and you're responsible for doing tasks, that's one thing. But if you have more of a leadership type role and you're overseeing, then that's a whole nother thing that you have to take into account in working with your team members and understanding what their expectations are, giving them the slack to make certain decisions and do things their way that, maybe it's not necessarily what you would do, but you don't want to micromanage them as well. You want to give them, well, that'll work. But if what they want to do, obviously is going to change the scope of the project and cause problems down the road, then you need to step in and figure out how do you communicate that with them and help them understand why it may need to be a little bit different in order for the project to be successful.
So do leadership.
So if you have something that is measurable, like you have an old way and you have a new way, and you can measure the old way, like how long did this take before? What was the impact? What were the results? Like if you can, like what kinds of things can you actually measure? Like you can measure time.
Time is the easiest one, right? Time is something that everybody, has a limited supply of, especially at work. Like, oh, you're only at work for 8 hours. If it takes you 70 hours to do something every week, you're not going to be a happy camper, right? If it takes you an hour and the process change gets you to a minute, well, you'll be happy. But if it gets you to 58 minutes, is that as big a success? Well,
right.
Probably, because a lot of the underlying things changed, and that 58 minutes can go down from there later on, right? So you're setting up, you're having a tiny success now, setting up future successes, right? I've certainly done that in projects where, like, okay, this isn't going to be a huge improvement for this particular spot, but if we do this change now, the next thing on our list is going to be so much easier and so much faster.
Yeah,
it makes sense to do
that, like setting yourself up for opportunities for future success.
Right.
Yeah.
So what happens? So a lot of times expectations change, right? I mean, you got a big project, and all of a sudden, how success is measured is continually evolving and it's continually changing. And as new things are introduced or things are taken away, though those expectations are changing. How do you keep everybody on the team informed of the changes and how you had the kickoff meeting, but all of a sudden you're 4 months down the road and things are looking a lot different? How do you make sure that everybody's on the same page?
hopefully incrementally through stand-ups every day that the whole team is moving. But if that doesn't happen, if some of the team is sort of disconnected or just not paying attention and realizing that, we're not doing that anymore, we've shifted over here. You kind of have to have another. I've been on projects where you've had a second kickoff meeting, right? Like, well, here we go. This is what we're really building now, and I just wanted to make sure everybody's hearing the same exact words from my mouth the same way, so that we're all in this, together, right? And you can be on a team and sort of everybody's just treading water and sort of jogging in place and going. And then if something has changed outside of your team, you might not pick up on it right away, right? Like you might be like, oh, wait a minute. You guys are all just jogging. We're supposed to be sprinting right now. We need to be sprinting really fast. So those kinds of things are something you can do. And, like we've said over and over and over, communicate, right?
Yeah.
It's the easiest thing, but it's the hardest thing.
Right.
So do you think tied to that is also making sure that your team members are you've earned the trust with them so that they are being honest about where things are at and how things are going and what do you, because I had, so
Jeff, this sounds like a personal situation where somebody may have been telling you it was fine and then it wasn't fine all of a sudden.
I was turning back to, I had somebody over at my house working on a project. He was working on actually putting in a garage door for me. And
Sure.
I went back to see him, how he's doing. He's a friend of mine. And I went to talk to him and he goes, oh, I got to go run back to Home Depot. And it was like his second or third trip to Home Depot that day. And I was like, Andy, I thought this only happens when I do the project.
Right.
He goes,
yeah.
He goes, no, that's how it works. I mean, this is a professional. And I think people taking the understanding that software development is very much like that and that's what the beauty of Agile is, right? Mistakes are made and you make corrections. Mistakes
Right.
are made, you make corrections. They're not intentional, but it's continually, especially getting people so that they trust each other so that they can just be honest and recognize that, that happens. You break a build. I mean, people have done it. Let's try not to have it happen again.
Yeah.
If you don't break the build, you're not checking in code. That's the rule.
Yeah.
That's my rule. I mean,
So
everybody should break the build.
Yeah. So the that you're measuring success by ensuring success, and that approach of that continual improvement, and so. But you do get to a point where it's like, well, I'm not sure what else we can do. Like, I think we're done. It's like we've checked all the boxes. And so like with the intranet redesign that we just did, it's like, I got to a point where it's like, well, I don't know what else to do. I think it's like,
we should make a release. Good.
Yeah. And, it passed muster, for our QA BA detail oriented person that catches all my mistakes. So, and then how long before you're going to have enough to where you can accurately measure? Like, how long do I wait until I can check the box that says I did a good job and this is working for us and people like it, people aren't complaining? I can track that side of it, like feedback and things like that. But as far as long-term results, I had some early feedback was, hey, I could find stuff. That's really the goal. Like, can you get what you need? And a few people could.
I think with an intranet project, Kyle, I think that has got to be like there is so few success indicators for that one, or mission accomplished we've talked about, right? Like you're never done. It's always changing. And people are either going to have a great experience because they found the one thing they were looking for. I mean, if I go out and I look for the PTO calendar or whatever you want to talk about, right? And if I find that, I'm happy.
Right.
If I don't, I'm unhappy. But I was only looking for one thing. I wasn't looking for every piece of employment data that I need, right?
Right. And that's like, I think understanding, you know, kind of the purpose, like, what are you trying to do with it?
Right.
What is it going to accomplish for you? Well, this is not a site where I'm just trying to get traffic, get ad views, get clicks, you know. It's there when people need it. So measuring it by traffic isn't really going to give you kind of an idea of success.
Well, and I think the other problem is your self-assessment. You know, you may be harder on yourself than others are, right? I mean, because you spent all the time putting it together. It's your baby. You designed it, and you know already as you're putting it together, there's new things that are popping up that are like, oh, I wish I could add this now. I wish I could add this now. But if I keep adding these things now, I'm never going to actually get it published. And so you're probably your hardest self. You know, you're the most critical of it yourself, right? And so then do you ever feel like you've ever had success if you're just that kind of tough on yourself, if you're a perfectionist, or you just happen to have the mindset of, you know, I got this done and it's off and running, and no, it's not perfect, but it's going to work for what we need it to do, and then we'll continue to move on. I think that's each is an individual situation, right? You know, how you look at the work that you do and how you contribute versus Peter versus myself, they're all going to be different. And so it makes it nearly impossible to everybody agree on the success.
You know, another key measurement of success is to decide what success looks like before you start, right?
Yeah.
Like if you don't know what success looks like, how are you going to know when you're done? Right.
And like, I heard
is Wikipedia done?
Right. I don't know who said this. One of our wise sage consultants, you know, they've been doing it forever.
A long list.
Like how you want to know, like requirements or like it's how do you test it? How will you test this?
Right.
To know that it's ready. And then you're basically triggering that person or team to think that way. Well, it's got to do this. And if this happens and this happens, then that's going to like mean that we did what we set out to do. So if I go in and I look at like search metrics and I don't have any abandoned searches, meaning somebody typed in keywords and then never went beyond that first page, never clicked through. They just were like, yeah, you know what?
I just wanted to see what I could find with search. That's all, Kyle.
Yeah, that's all. They're just investigating. They're just testing page one results. But that's something that you can look at and go, okay, we want people to find what they're looking for. Right. So that means that we're not going to like have a bunch of people asking us to send them things. They're going to go find it for themselves. We're going to have some kind of increase in traffic over time because it becomes a more reliable source of information that people trust and have success with. They find their way and they get to it. So you can kind of think through those things, and that I think helps you then understand what you're going to use in the future to measure it, but also did what you built kind of pass muster? Did it measure up? So,
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, and one, I think part of it too is putting it in context, right? I mean, how does this affect the business? How does this? So way back in the day when I was a young developer, I would have the snide comment of, no one's going to die over this. We'll figure it out. Let's fix it, right? And then all of a sudden, I worked on a payroll system for a union. They go, well, we might get a brick through the window, but I still don't think anybody's going to die over this. This is going to be great. And then I think just God's view of, fine, smart Alice, we're gonna put you out and you're gonna work on a medical device registration system.
Right.
And I'm like, crap, I can't use that line anymore.
Right.
And so, so I think, keeping it into context of things is like, all right, if they have to take a couple, I feel bad that it happened, but let's figure it out. We'll figure it out. Let's solve it. It's not a mission critical application that's going to shut down, the nuclear site. We're not talking Homer Simpson type situations, right? Let's stay. You can stay calm and not get yourself all worked up, but also still take everybody's opinion and feedback serious, so that you can continue to get better at what you're doing.
And I mean, even back in the old days, when we'd talk about success, we would consider some things like, oh, this was a successful release, even though we have to manually reboot the servers every hour because there's some sort of memory leak that we haven't found yet. But it's a success because we have people on there and able to do things. And as long as we reboot the servers in the right order every hour, then the site stays up and we're all happy, right? So it didn't start out as a success, but it kind of felt like we got there. And then once you cleaned up the memory leaks, then, it's even better.
So were you like, did you have inside information on one of my projects where we had to reboot the server every night?
No, we've all had those projects.
Oh man. Yeah. So
but it was a success, right? Even though you had to reboot the server once a night.
Well, and I think that kind of brings up another good metric is it robust? Is it,
sure.
Or is this just workarounds, kludgy, baling wire, duct tape, no, is this sturdy? Like you look at a piece of furniture and you're like, yeah, this thing is, somebody this thing is solid. Like this thing will hold your car. This coffee table, you could park a truck on it. So some things you can kind of just tell quality when you see it. And, if it's a workaround, it's never as fast as going on the straight path. Like you're going around, you're taking we'll just have you take the long way. That'll be fine. But
Kyle, you're not still rebooting that server every night, right? I hope.
No, we've got a timer job that does it.
I suspect you fixed it after some time.
Yeah, we did fix it.
And made it more robust.
There was actually a service pack that fixed it.
So, I mean, there are things that are robust out of the gate, which is what everybody hopes for and searches for. And then there's the meeting reality, right? Like there are some things that you can test. I can test, or I can pretend that 1,000 people are simultaneously signing onto my site, but I can't go and call 1,000 people and have them simultaneously log into my site, right? That just happens because that's the use case for a particular company.
Yeah. And so when you launch on day one and you realize that the load of your 5 testers for that week leading up to the launch isn't the same as what happens because you didn't put the render inside of the function. The semicolon was 3 lines up from where it should be. Like, I'm not talking from experience. I don't know what you're talking about.
It sounds maybe personal there, but yeah, I mean, those are the kinds of things that we do, and I would consider those successful, right?
Well, part of it is you understand what would be failure, right? And so you're making sure that those pieces are not going to be they're not going to be the ones that cause the failure, right? And so there's just some critical pieces that need to be right. And so you do make sure that you understand what those pieces are, because you may not know exactly what success is, but you probably have a really good idea of what failure is. And so,
Yeah, you know what,
so just
rollback.
even trying to avoid failure. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Rollback is not fun.
No.
But it's nice to have a rollback plan instead of
Just in
not
case.
having a rollback plan, right?
Yeah.
Because we've all done those releases too.
Yeah. You know what? Here's your old laptop back. Use this for a while while I fix the new one that we just gave you.
Right.
Well, I think, and that, like, again, you can't measure too quickly because you're going to have surprises. It's like you can't call it a failure just because there was issues the first week. Like,
I wouldn't call most things a failure just because there were some issues the first week.
right.
You do your best to keep them minimized so that there's not nothing but issues the first week. But
yeah, we launched, people screamed, we fixed it, they stopped screaming, and they started like clapping. It was like the turnaround. Hopefully they don't write you off on the first sign of any kind of bug or failure.
I'm pretty sure that you've never heard clapping inside of a building after a release.
No, that I just imagine that applause is happening after I fix something. Yeah, I need that. So calculating ROI. Have you ever been asked to calculate ROI? Return on investment.
I have not been asked to do that. Most of that ROI experience has been done before I come in the door.
Okay.
Somebody has said, we need this. Oh yeah, prove it. They prove it. And then I walk in the door and I make it. Rather than sort of, well, we think we want to do this, and we kind of need to do that, like internet, right? An intranet project is almost impossible to calculate ROI because it's really how much employee time am I saving versus the old way.
Yeah, and the 5 times I've heard someone say that putting the cafeteria menu on the homepage saved us $7 million.
Right.
It's like, yeah, okay.
I mean, because that cut down the browse time for everybody at lunchtime to go look at the cafeteria menu, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and calls, distractions. Like if you can't find something and you need it, now you're involving somebody else. Now you got 2 people's time. And then they send you the old thing because they downloaded it 2 years ago, and now you're making decisions on bad information. So that's a high cost if something isn't successful.
Right.
But it's not like, so it's like, okay, is there a negative ROI?
I mean, yeah, you can make people's jobs harder, right? I've seen that happen occasionally where I used to be able to do this in 5 minutes and now it takes me 25 minutes. Like, what's the ROI on that?
Yeah.
Well, eventually, maybe your 25 minutes saves somebody else 3 hours, but you have to be able to point to that.
Or we got off some old hardware that we no longer have to pay absorbent amount of money for, right? And so all of a sudden you're switching systems or you're switching platforms, and so the end user experience may be worse, even though behind the scenes the dollars are pretty significant.
Well, and the risk, right? The risk of failure or hardware failure.
Yeah, and I think with disruptive changes, it's those make your lives worse and then better.
Right.
It's going to be harder before it's easier.
Yep.
Because it's new and it's a change. We're fundamentally changing the way you work from day to day with this new thing.
Every time you get a new Windows release, right, you're fundamentally changing the way that you use the operating system on your laptop.
The start button belongs on the far left, not in the middle. Microsoft Windows.
I'm not gonna get into that involved change, but it is a workflow change, right? And it does take some getting used to. But once you're used to it, it might be 10 times faster, but not right away.
But oftentimes you also have users involved in the whole development in itself, right? And so hopefully you have champions already within the user community that have been part of it and have already been helping coach and prepare the users for the changes that they're going to be experiencing. And when you have that alignment and that support, because they've been involved in the decision making, so they have as much ownership as you writing the code behind the scenes, and so then that can make you're going through it together, right? And they had a big say in what was designed and developed.
Well, and what you're talking about business involvement, that was a pivot point for the entire industry of, you know what, we really need it to be about the business, not about IT. And we need to get them involved early instead of believing that we know best. Because that changed the game.
I mean, that's been a slow process to change, because in the old days, IT was so expensive that somebody had to make that decision, and so you'd bring in experts from IT, and they would make those choices and drive that business. But eventually, it got to the point where, it's easier to have the business involved, and it's right to have the business involved right away.
Well, and waterfall methodologies, caused a lot of the challenges, right? Because the users didn't really exactly understand exactly what they needed, but the requirements are signed off on, and so that's what they're going to get.
Yeah, 2 years ago, you said you needed this button to be here, and now you don't? Right. What?
Yeah.
Come on.
Oh, I guess it's okay. Yeah. Well, and I haven't heard the phrase or the quote from Henry Ford in quite a while, which is good. And that is, if I had asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses.
Right.
So that was, in reference to the Model T, and you're inventing a car, but that doesn't really, if it's affecting the business users, the people on the front lines, in the trenches, you have to get them involved. You have to have their input. Otherwise, it's not what IT did for us. It's what IT did to us.
Yeah.
And that's the definition of success, right? And that's how you first started this whole conversation, Kyle, is the customer happy.
Right. Yeah. And then there's, I'm okay with no news. I'd like feedback, but if I'm not hearing grumbling, that's great. Even better is when I hear positive feedback. And then if users are ecstatic, then that'll keep me going for another couple years at least. That.
Right.
Well, and if they ask you to do the next project, right? And so if they want you to stay on and continue to work and do the next one, whether you want to or not, but that's always also a good sign is they want you back, right?
Nice to be asked. Yeah.
They want to continue to work with you because obviously you brought value.
Yeah. We see that frequently where places don't want to let someone go. No, you can't have them back. We don't know what we're going to do with them. We don't have the next thing lined up, but you can't. But we're going to keep them because of that track record of success. And we know there's going to be stuff, and so we're going to go and generate it just to keep that person there, because trusting somebody to like pull something off, that's one of the big problems is like when people don't succeed and you don't have that trust. But once you rely on, that's like what happens to people. Like the best people get all the work dumped on them.
Well, it also contributes to the centralized, decentralized systems, right? And so all of a sudden everything is centralized, and then you're asking for things and you're not getting them, or they're not getting delivered like you want. So then within your own team, you start developing your own solutions, and then pretty soon everything becomes decentralized, and that's going to work better. And then they realize this isn't a very good idea, so we should bring it all back centralized. And so then there's a big project, and then you go back to decentralized, and which basically keeps us consulting firms very much in the need forever.
Yeah. Well, I found that because I've done a number of intranet projects and content management and things like that. And when there's like different departments have their own intranets that they've done in secret, this one's in OneNote, this one's in Word, this one's in Excel. Like this one is the old intranet that we basically downloaded as a .mht. And we just have it on a file share. We just keep pulling that up. Like, those are good, I guess, tells or indicators that something is not successful. Like people are finding their own workarounds for your solution.
Well, it doesn't mean that the project isn't successful. It's just not all encompassing, right? Like you can have you're talking intranet, which yes, everybody should use the same intranet, but some of the other projects that sort of build on other work is kind of, a way to look at, like, we had success with this project and it was so good that they added their other secret spice to it.
Well, and it's like, okay, successful for who?
Right.
We've made this really successful for the people that are consuming the stuff, but it's worse for the people that are putting it out there.
Right.
So it's like, does it have to
bad for HR?
Right. Does it have to be successful for everybody?
Or for the future people that'll be working on the project after you've left.
That's another good way to look at success.
Is there comments in your code? Is there how many different how many of the same class do you have in your CSS file over and over again? Like, oh crud, which one is it? I've got three different versions of it, no comments, things like that. Yeah. So leaving your campsite better than you found it.
It's always a goal.
Maintainable. Well, like part of your job as a consultant is to put yourself out of work.
Right. And the only way to do that is to document things. If you're the only one that knows how the code works, then you're in a really bad spot to get out of there if you don't want to be there.
Unless that's how you make your money.
No.
No. That's why it's like, okay, there's maintenance documents, there's trainings, there's handoffs, that's
not success. That is failure if you're the only person that can make it work.
Out of the loop. I need to walk away and be able to go on a trip and lay on the beach and recover. And
if you can't take vacation, then your work isn't successful.
Yeah. If you can't move on to the next thing. Yeah, you always want to leave things in a in a successful situation, which means maintainable, extensible. I don't think you can future-proof things. I think that's a myth, but
future-proof is really hard.
Right. You can make it like, okay, if it never has to change, it's working. We're all good. If it never has to change, if the factors never change, the way we work never changes,
Right.
then we're fine.
I mean, we've all been involved with replacing projects that have existed for 15 years as a success.
Yeah.
But they're not growing with the organization, so
Right.
you have to come in and we want exactly this, but in new technology. That's going to be our starting point because we can't fix anything on this old thing.
Right.
Or you're dealing with like regulations that have changed, whether it's in the finance or the healthcare industry. I mean, those industries are, the system works great until all of a sudden new laws are passed, right?
It's no longer legal to do this.
Yeah, and so now all of a sudden, how you determine is successful, because it does need to be done by December 31st, and then that's a whole nother set of situations.
Right. So it, like, in terms of doing a project, like finishing on time, finishing within budget, delivering something that, works the way it was intended, things like that. But then there's the long-term, user success, business success with just doing the project in the first place. But then there's like curveballs, like, well, we built this in Silverlight.
On a tabletop.
Yeah.
Those are some famous words.
ActiveX, or like Internet Explorer is going away, and it would, like, the only reason we're still using it is for that one thing that we're still using to run our business on. But when those things change, like, we can no longer do things this way, or this isn't going to work anymore. How do you see that coming? Like, that's not a failure if the world changes around you in a way you couldn't predict.
If you choose a technology after the press release that it's going away, that's a failure. But if you had chosen a technology a decade earlier and it's time to replace it, it's been successful.
Yeah, and I think you're looking at it on a spectrum, right, or on a curve, right? I mean, nothing's ever 100%, successful per se, because there's always things that you could have done a little bit better, whether it's how long it took you to do it, or the decisions that you made, or things that you missed. And so it's always graded on a curve, and you're just trying to understand and assess, what got you into the 80% mark type of thing versus it sitting in the 60% mark, and then is it, in reality with what expectations were, you're probably never going to get out of the 80% mark of success anyway, just because of the nature of the project that you're working on, and the team that you're on, and who you're working with, and how good they are, and their availability, and there's so many different factors here. It's very much it's going to be on a spectrum, and you're just going to the nice part about Agile is you're going to continue to look at ways that it can continue to get better as you're moving out, and then moving obviously to a product type mindset as well can also help in that regard.
It's funny, as a consultant, one of the ways that you determine success or look at success after the fact is when you're leaving a client, you determine whether the time was successful, right? Did you accomplish what you were sent there to do? Sometimes the answer is yes, but sometimes the answer is, of course, totally did it. Knocked it out of the park. It was so easy. Do it again.
Well, you know how it went, and you know
how it felt.
Yeah, kind of what you built and how well it's, kind of when you took a shortcut or a workaround, or.
But to be honest, there've been projects that I've been on for 4 years, and then the contract is up, and you're like, well, but I still have more to do.
Yeah,
but it was a success. But it had to end.
Can I work on this for free? No. No, you can't. You have other things to do. Well, sorry. Yeah, it's hard to let go sometimes when it's like this. Well, now we could do this. Now you guys get these ideas and see these
Right.
opportunities. It's like, that's all great stuff for the future. That doesn't mean this wasn't successful.
Right.
That's kind of where the minimum viable product idea comes in. We're calling this a success. This is our first success, is just this functional thing that's doing what the basics of what we needed to do. It's, I used to call it like, it's not Christmas morning. It's
No.
like, you're not making you can make your Christmas list, but it's not going to happen all at once. This is a Christmas, birthday, next Christmas gift. This is a long-term thing. It's a process. I look at how long things last. Like the longevity of a solution. Like the first thing I built was still in use 10 years later.
Right.
And I was shocked. And it went through like 3 upgrades.
Mhm.
And I felt like part of that was just luck. That it worked out that way. Like the platform didn't change so much that it made that obsolete. Like it just went along with it, and still worked, and it worked for them. So like that's something that there was ROI. That they got their money's worth out of. I don't know how long things should last though in the world of tech.
Well, and that's a great question. How long should your phone last? How long should your smartwatch last? How long should your coffee cup last? How long should your webcam last? I mean, those are like 50 years ago, you didn't buy a watch and say, this watch is going to be good for 3 years, hopefully.
No, this watch was handed down.
This watch, right.
3 different generations.
It's gone to 4 wars, and it's finally being given to so-and-so. But technology is a little bit different. And, that's the world we live in, where everything is evolving as we go, right? I think 10 years is probably too long for something to last, and yet that's what you hope for every time.
Yeah. Like, did it hit a point where you're missing out? Like, yeah, it's still viable. We're still using it. It's lasting. Look how long it's lasting. And it's like, well,
but it sure hurts.
There's way, like, we can redo this and make it even better now with all the new stuff. And, so like, that's, got to be tough to kind of hit that at the right spot.
Peter still misses his Palm Pilot.
I've found my Palm Pilot the other day, and I did charge it up. So I'm not saying that, I don't miss it.
There's still to-dos on the Palm Pilot listed that you haven't finished yet.
Well, man. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
But you got everybody's birthday now.
But technology changes, and you got to move with it. And the same goes for applications. So even though, like, the mission accomplished banner gets hung, it does get old and frayed and covered in dust and get taken down and put up a new mission accomplished banner.
Well, what you do is, at a certain point, you just change what the mission was in retrospect. And it just happened to align with what we did. So we're good. Hang the banner. So parting thoughts?
I had the best parting thought 20 minutes ago, and I totally lost it.
All right.
I think start with your defining success before you start your project. I think that's the best way to get there.
Yeah, totally agree. I think it's, making sure you understand why you're doing this project in the first place. What is it that needs to get done, and just, working together as a team, continuing to keep everybody on the same page so that they understand that this is what we're working towards. Let's stay on track, and let's to continue to focus on this. And there's going to be bumps in the road, and that's going to happen, and we're going to get done with this. And there's going to be things that we'll look back at and say, we could have made some better choices and some better decisions. And that's just part of the process. That's how it works. And so, but as long as you continue to work together towards the similar end in mind, that's your only chance.
Kyle, how about you?
Keep your eye on the prize.
Keep your eye on the prize.
Listen to the people, pay attention. I mean, it's like you'll have a sense of it, I think, if it's not something you can measure, because there's things you can't measure. There's just things you can't anticipate, things you can't measure.
Smile on someone's face is hard to measure.
Yeah. So, kind of, I guess, figure out how you're going to, how are you going to know? Define that. And even if it's, we're not really going to know, there's really no good way of knowing, or we're not going to know right away. So know if you can define that or not, or maybe it's we're gonna define success in 6 months. That's when we're gonna see what's really happening.
We will know that it was successful in 6 months, but we won't know when we release it.
Right.
Well, and hopefully they're well defined enough that your team can celebrate together, right? Hey, let's celebrate this success, this milestone, because we did accomplish it, and to the degree that we needed to. Again, it's to the degree, and so that you guys are going to want to work on the next project again, and that people are going to want you to be their team to work on their next project again.
Excellent. Well, I think with that, we'll say goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Solution Design Group is a digital product consultancy in Minneapolis. Check us out on the web at solutiondesign.com or look for us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram at Solution Design Group.